Vitaly, one of the questions that I'm facing on a daily basis in my work is the question that I'm going to face you with. It's what the hell is user experience design and why it matters?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think that we have this really interesting and I think wrong assumption of what it should be or what it is. I think in many ways, every single person who is contributing to a product, to a website, to an application, anything, is a user experience designer. And when I mean that, I say somebody who is building a product, somebody who is planning a product, somebody who is responsible for customer service, they're all designing the experience. So in that way, they are user experience designers. So they are a part of the UX team. And it's not treated this way. I think very often you see R&D teams, and you see maybe customer support team, and you see a design team, and they're very separate. And I think that we're missing that connection, because in the end, everybody's contributing to UX. So I think that UX really is all about connecting the part of the experience to make something usable and accessible for customers, but also driving business goals. I think you cannot see it as a separate thing, like we do the UX part and we don't think about business, or we don't think about the technical debt, or we don't think about the front-end architecture. I feel it's really kind of connected as one. It just, very often it is disconnected by the nature of organization in which we're working. So it kind of needs to, it's an umbrella really, to me, if it makes sense.
Yeah, but isn't it funny that people don't really pay attention to user experience design because good or great design is seamless. It's like people don't notice it because it works so well. But every time something annoys them, like something loads too long or they cannot find certain information, then they say, oh, this is a bad design.
Yeah.
This is definitely bad design. But you actually, you do user experience and user interface design, and you do front-end development as well, which gives the whole kind of web design package. Could you explain the relation between the two, between user experience design and front-end development, and how do these disciplines and functions complement each other?
Yeah, that's also a very interesting point, because I think that we all came in this world of the web sideways in a way. So I remember like starting like 22 years ago, and I didn't understand that there is a front end, there is a UX, there is a design. It was just web stuff. You just come up with some ways to write HTML, and then we didn't have a CSS back then, and then you add some styling, and then you add some images, and then you think about what the right way to navigate is, and this is it, right? And we kind of diverged a little bit, so we specialized, as it often is with every mature industry. So you end up with people specializing in one thing and the other, and the further we go, the further we specialize. So now I don't even know what front-end means, because now if you're kind of quoting Brett Frost, he's speaking about the front side of front-end and the back side of front-end, because you could be doing just CSS and HTML, but you could also be doing all the way JavaScript, which is kind of then moving more to the server. So that's kind of the technical bits, like this is the way website or web application is built, or an application in general is built. That would be the front-end part, but then you have the interface design part and how people move on the page, on the pages of a website, how people use an application, right? And that would be more about the experience in terms of do people understand what is going on? Do people understand the hierarchy on the page, how to navigate it? And that would be more the UX part. And the UI is kind of something that is displayed to the customer, that connects really the UX and the front-end part. Because whenever you have the technical side, on top of that you have the UI that actually you are showing to the customer. And then the UX is really something that's, as long as it's clear how to navigate and everything is connected, then people understand that too, right?
Yeah, but what happens when front-end developers do their thing and user experience or user interface designers do their thing, and there's no connection between them or dialogue?
Yes. That's an interesting story, because I think that over the last 5 years maybe, there has been a very interesting change. On the one hand, for a long time we had front-end developers and we had UX designers. That was very, very clear. But now we also get front-end designers, and we also get UI engineers. It's all moving in the same direction, kind of converging towards the one. It seems like that, at least. And so that means essentially people who are doing code, they also understand some bits of the design, and people who are doing design understand some parts of the code. And I think that this is the magical recipe, really. to kind of understand what's going on. The problem still is that we haven't really figured out that ideal perfect process of, some people say there is no handoff between design and development anymore, it's just the one. So because, for example, when you think about any project, you can always break it down into a set of components, and these components could be built separately than designed, so you don't need to know the design in order to build out the skeleton of it, or scaffold it, and then you fill it in with colors and the different variants and the different behaviors and the responsiveness and all of that. But you don't need to have the full design before you start building, right? And at the same side, that means that when we think about colors, typography, they'll be defined as tokens, as config file, or as settings, which then get, pushed to developers as well. So I do feel like we had this area, we had this world in which we had front end, had this world in which we had design, and very often you will find accessibility kind of drifting. It's either in the front end part or it will be in the design part, and now it's in both, right? And now it kind of seems to be converging.
Okay. So the common theme of these conversations that I'm having seems to be ethics and more humane technology. And I watched your keynote on making web experiences more humane. I absolutely loved it, and I know it will be difficult for you to explain it without props or illustrations or screens or animations, but could you please give me a few good advices on how to make web experiences more humane? Because it's so metrics driven, sometimes it lacks personality, sometimes it should be more remarkable, more humane, because it will speak to us, because we are naturally and instinctively seeking things that are amazing or awe-inspiring. So what could be done to make web experiences more humane?
Yeah, that's also a very good point, because I think that the reason why we ended up in where we are today, and it's not necessarily a horrible world, it's just a very predictable world. And this is driven by the fact that we are relying on things that worked in the past, and we are kind of diving into these conversations about the perfect border radius and the perfect spacing, and it's all important conversations, but in the end I'm wondering if many people actually notice. They might feel that something is off, as you said, but they might not feel that something is right. But if they don't feel that something is right, you're kind of missing this opportunity to connect with them emotionally. So I would say that go against the waves, go against the storm, and that means, for example, maybe slow down somebody when they're not expecting it. And maybe, if you have a newsletter box where you make it, really want people to sign up, well, maybe use it as an opportunity to say, hey, you tap once, well, maybe you should tap again, and maybe you should tap one more time, and maybe one more time, kind of make it a game almost, with maybe a little character or so. So they really want to subscribe by the end of that. So like they don't have to type just once, they have to type maybe 5 or 6 times. It could also be as simple as just flip something upside down. Like, for example, think about the most boring elements you have on your page. This could be, I don't know, a select menu. It could
be contact form.
Yes.
Usually.
Yeah, absolutely. Any kind of form. Think about title, like when you're in the checkout, and just allow people to choose. Maybe they want to be a prince today, or I don't know, baron, or I don't even know what's out there. So think about the most boring things that you have and try to flip them upside down when people don't expect that. And on the other hand, I think it's really important to have a story as well. And I'm not talking about the story being like, let's create a parallax experience, but something like a voice and tone that's really consistent throughout, all the way throughout. That goes for customer support as well.
But people forget that copy is part of UX.
Copy is very, very important, yes. I think like one thing that's really frustrating to me is that there are so many little details that can incredibly drive business metrics as well, and they're seen as this little nicety that just, a little bit of UX sparkles, right? One very good example of that is disabled buttons in forms. I mean, I don't know who is going to watch it later, but if you're watching now and you think about this situation, which I'm sure you experienced before, and I think that you, Philip, did as well. You are being asked for your shipping address because you're buying a shirt or something, and you're typing in your address, and the interface tells you, no, that's wrong, because it doesn't exist in our database. You're like, but I'm right, because I've been living there for 2 years, I know that this address is correct, but the interface tells you, no, you're wrong. And so what do? Just abandon. And very often we don't even track it properly. We think about abandonment if, on the first page of this, on the second. But these people who are being told that their address is wrong, there is no way for them to proceed. It's like literally, they're absolutely 100% living, right? And so maybe, we can make sure that we are a bit more thankful and very kind to those people who actually want to buy something, saying, well, it seems like your address is incorrect, but if you're perfectly certain that this is right, then proceed nevertheless. Right?
I've had conversation with my team and a few colleagues regarding what you give as examples of something remarkable, interesting, giving personality. And I found that there is a very thin line between cute and annoying.
Yes.
Like people can find MailChimp annoying.
Yes.
And if you have to click at something 3 times because it disagrees with you, because designers thought it's going to be cute, they might be wrong in this case, in this particular case. So, looking from a different perspective, what do you consider the most annoying and terrible web design trends and patterns that you notice, or even common mistakes that we make as designers but are nonetheless annoying?
Yeah, so I do agree with you. So if you make people click 3 or 4 times, you will annoy people. But I think there is a space sometimes. If you want to kind of really people to be connected in some way with your brand or with your product, with your company in any way, if everything is fine, there is no way to connect. You kind of need to encourage some sort of emotional response. That can also be by just incredibly beautiful and delightful experience in terms of everything is just really clean and smooth and fast and accessible and all of that. But you can also try to add a little bit of friction every now and again, and this is what I meant with this checkbox. But I get that it's probably not going to work in a large enterprise environment, right? And to your question now, I think, what was the question again?
The question was the most annoying patterns that you notice, or even very common mistakes that we make as designers.
Exactly. So I think that most of them, and this was kind of my field of study in last year actually, most of those things are related to web forms. There are many, many things that are done just because we've always done it this way, right? And so one of them is the fact that we rely on validation. This is the one I mentioned. Like we're just assuming that inline validation works, and it doesn't. There is no 100% bulletproof inline validation. There will be people who are locked out, always. And every time, this experience is where you hit the input field, you didn't even have a chance to type in a single character, and you're being penalized because an error message shows up because the input is missing, right? You didn't even have a chance to type in anything. You tapped on the input field and you're being penalized. Or maybe you start typing and it kind of keeps this jungle of all kind of error messages thrown at you. But let me finish speaking first. It's like interrupting somebody when they're speaking, right? You don't want that, right? That's a very common one. Another thing is that I think that many of us dismiss carousels as being a very, very bad, horrible thing that we don't want to do and we don't want to use. If you design a good carousel, people might actually use it. So if you look at, when people book hotels, for example, hotel rooms for like business trip or so, they will be looking through all the pictures in the carousels to ensure that they're not getting a bad hotel room, right? There is nothing wrong with the carousel per se. It's more like an image gallery sort of thing. If you want to show testimonials, there is nothing wrong with having a very long carousel. It's just about how to design it. Because if you just have a little dot that doesn't indicate anything but the progress, why should people click on it? But instead, if you make it a bit more contextual, like maybe describing with the label who that person is, or maybe describing with a little video, or maybe just having a picture of a person, right? A picture of a product, right? That might be working much better. So carousel with arrows and ... that's probably a bad idea.
So the most interesting web design, web experience trends that you are following right now and hope that they will reach their full potential soon and you could use them as use cases? Yeah,
I think we're kind of making full circle because I don't think that there is any project that can afford not thinking at least, or not considering at least accessibility by default.
Oh yeah.
You have to, right? And it's not just accessibility at this point, it's more like inclusive design. It also affects the way you choose colors, the way you choose pronouns, the way you write copy, the way the performance works, and things like that. and the speed, of course, of the website as well. And on the other side, we have this incredible move of people trying to claim back their privacy, the right to their data, that we saw, of course, with GDPR as a part of it. So this drives me, at least, to thinking that we are moving to very nice times. I mean, of course, GDPR and all the cookie problems, it's not a wonderful experience, but we're moving to times where people are expecting that experiences that they see on the web are going to be respectful of their choices, respectful of the choices in terms of dark mode or light mode, in terms of a large font size, small font size, in terms of privacy aware, not privacy aware, right? Yet still, one thing that we're missing is really understanding that complexity, right? Because we now have not just mobile and desktop, we have different kinds of mobile, we have different kinds of desktop, we have very low-end devices, we have very high-end devices, and everything in between, which makes things really, really complicated. But one thing that, just to kind of wrap it up, just think that one that kind of connects it really now is that we have moved to this opinion that design systems are the way forward, and I think this is good. It goes against the thinking that everything should be custom, but I think that in many ways, once we have reliable components we can rely on, when building, when designing, we can then move forward and design experiences that are more inclusive and also more aware of the privacy considerations as well. So I'm very hopeful that this is going to be changing a lot, and I see many companies really taking this to its heart. So accessibility being a very fundamental thing that's not just something you add later, right? Which I think is something we wanted for maybe 20 years, and I feel like it's coming.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to stick to this thought because since we're discussing more humane technology, and accessibility is for people with disabilities as well, or maybe first and foremost. And in game design, it's extremely important. Like you have certain kinds of disability, motor disability, and
motion sickness, so many.
Exactly, and when you use pad or other forms of interaction with machine, it's extremely important. And you mentioned typography, you mentioned contrast, you mentioned fonts. Is there anything else that you would point out as things that we should pay attention to when thinking of designing accessible digital products?
Yeah, there is video. I mean, one thing that's really surprised me when I was doing research last year is that how many people actually use captioning. It's unbelievable, right? Because normally I would think, well, if it's in my native language, I'm perfectly comfortable with that, and I just listen to it, right? But there are so many scenarios, and we often think about accessibility still being just something for people who have disability, right? But this is not the case at all. Like, I mean, I'm using captioning all the time because maybe I'm eating popcorn. Maybe I'm in a public transportation. I do not want to avoid people around me, right? I don't have headphones with me, right? And to the point that actually when you usually today, captioning is obviously going to be auto-generated on YouTube and so on. And so whenever you're on Twitter, I love it. I absolutely love it when I see captioning just automatically playing on the videos because it's kind of hard-coded, I guess. That's also a part of it. The same goes for any kind of audio, right, as well. So having transcripts, that's another story. But then, of course, especially in the really world of complex applications, where we have single-page applications, changing the views and all of that, it has to be communicated, right, properly to the user who might be hard of hearing or hard of seeing, right? So all these things are kind of a part of that as well. And I think that they're not really explored well yet.
Okay.
This is where we'll have to do some work. But I mean, Philip, as I said, I'm very, very hopeful that we are. I think that this year, and maybe last year, to me personally, it was a big reset. I mean, I rediscovered external keyboard. I've been working from coffee shops for 12 years, and I cannot go back to trackpad anymore. It's like I rediscovered a keyboard, a mouse, I have a stand, and to the point that I actually have a plant. Guess what? This is groundbreaking for me, and I think that in many ways, the things that we learned in our experiences at homes, also defined in the way that we pay more attention to people around us, and we pay more attention to people who are going to use our interfaces in the end. So I'm very, very hopeful that this time was kind of a big refresher about how we're going to see interfaces as time moves forward. Yeah. And I couldn't be more optimistic, to be honest.
Yeah, I can relate. People don't really understand why I always prefer to play with keyboard and mouse, play video games than, you know,
Yeah.
better and better PlayStation pads. I just prefer it, yeah, so I understand.
Yeah, so this is the future.
Yeah.
The future is bright. PlayStation and gamepads.